Hello, and welcome to the Armen Show Podcast. People, science, creativity, learning more, expanding our framework, and always connecting with the coolest people. On this episode here, we have from a fellow in the field of growth, similar to myself, epic beings, Sukun Chopra. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Armen. Great to be here.
I'm glad to have you on. It is cool to connect. I had seen your material from your speaking with Srinivas, who I know of from a long time. Srinivas Rao, wonderful. Sukun, you're in the space. How would you describe yourself? What got you into the space in the first place? Why does it speak to you as an individual?
Thanks for asking. So I'm in the conscious living space, and my core themes are self-awareness, authentic connection, and conflict resolution. And I also podcast, which obviously you know because you saw me on with Srinivas. So I'm a podcaster, and I'm a conscious living facilitator. And I got in this space by pure curiosity and you could say randomness, because I didn't really have a life plan to get into this like a few years ago. It just like really happened for me quite spontaneously. And yeah, I just like have been very curious about people. And one of my core passions is understanding why we humans are wired the way we are. And one thing led to the other. And I just dove into this space, and now I'm doing what I'm doing now. So yeah.
That's cool. That's a broad question, actually, to ask, but I thought I'd throw it in there because challenge question. Why are we the way that we are? What makes us most the way that we are, Sukun?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think at our core, we are extremely complex beings. There is no black or white about us, as much as we like to believe that, because there are so many layers to ourselves, and it takes so much of awareness and unpeeling that the more you peel, the more you uncover. And the sad part is very often we go through our lives like, just blindly walking into our versions of reality, which half the time isn't even true because, what we adopted as messages growing up, our conditioning, our experiences, we all have mental models that some we're aware of, some we're not aware of. And they all play a part in how we show up for ourselves and how we show up for the world. And I mean, yeah, that's a part of my answer, but we can obviously dive deeper into this depending on how you want to navigate this conversation.
Makes sense. On that concept of recognizing your qualities, what have been some things that come to mind in your existence that have helped you recognize your qualities? Can you pin those down? Do anything come to mind that, okay, that moment or that place or that location or this activity, and now I figured out more about myself, how I appear from a neutral, like third-party perspective?
In me as an individual? Yeah, so I actually grew up with a lot of limiting beliefs, to be honest. That was my reality for most of my life, which sucks. But thanks to school, which literally ruined my sense of self, because back in the day, and I think even in most ways, even now, like your intelligence is based on what you score and how much you get in like on paper and so on. So, and the way the system was designed and the way education was taught, I just became convinced by my teachers that like I'm just not good enough. And so I carried that narrative for like a very long part of my life, which kept me clueless, which kept me stuck. And it's only through, I think, hitting rock bottom in my late 20s, I was like, this is not working for me. I'm not really making an impact in anything in my life right now. I feel like I'm not sure what I'm doing, where I'm heading. And so it's funny because, your parents say one thing, you're great, you have this potential, like you can do so much. And then your belief is like, your inner belief is like, no, but that's not true because I've always been told otherwise. Because for whatever reason, I mean, we obviously do end up spending way more time in schools with our teachers and our friends. And it is very competitive, and it's not the most friendliest environment to grow up in for 18 years, especially of your life. So yeah, I think one of my limiting beliefs was that I just am not smart or good enough. And that was something I've uncovered. So yeah, I wonder what else like has been a big belief that I've now busted, but that was definitely one part of it. Yeah.
One concept on that I've thought of. Have you noticed this, that maybe those that cause a limiting effect, they'll say things that seem to be inspirational, but they're not. So they might say like, you could be doing so much, So underneath that is like they're saying you're not doing much, or you could be this great thing, but they wouldn't say that if you were the great thing.
So true,
I've
man.
noticed that things like, do you know what you're saying? Actually, it sounds like you're, helping up there, but it's almost like you're saying you're not there. It's very clear. And we as observers,
That's actually, you hit the nail on the head there. But did you have a similar experience with yourself?
I've had similar,
Seems like it resonates.
yeah, there are times when it has shown up. And I thought of that concept like, wait a minute, so are you saying I am super duper and we need to work on building this super duper nature? Or you're saying this is no good and I should be more like yourself? And usually the yourself from that individual is not that jovial or full of well-being or
Right.
self-aware. So that doesn't seem inspiring to reach toward. It seems
True.
like I go walk into a box. Any relation to that concept?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's how actually it works.
It's a funny, like, what are you actually saying underneath that? Because you wouldn't say that. Let's say they were like, Sukun, you're amazing and we are not. We need to figure out how to expand your framework because you're the star here and there are great qualities that we don't have. We want to see more of that because it lights up our lives. That'd be a different way to say it, but it never
Yeah.
comes across that way. It's
I
like,
mean, like, whatever you may hear from people, and no matter how encouraging it may seem, it doesn't feel authentic to you because you have convinced yourself otherwise. And that's the problem. Unless you change your core beliefs, nothing anyone says is going to matter. And that's just how we are wired. We need that evidence for ourselves. And that can only come from within.
right. Would you say that if you went back to that time when limiting beliefs are a strong element versus now, that individual would be more likely to take random hits from people and just go with it versus now, if it showed up, you'd be more like, no, wait a minute, this is me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't have my guard up or defenses up about it. Like, I'll obviously be more aware of what's coming right at me and what I want to accept and what I want to reject. Because that's where your power lies, right? The moment you become aware of actually what stands true for yourself, and more than that, what actually is serving you and your current reality, that's when you gain back your power over all the noise that's happening around us, which is pretty much all the time in the world that we live in.
There's a bunch of noise across all the regions. Did you have any, or does any key figure come to mind that you linked with along the way that was on the same page or a close friend or such where that connection helped you get out of the limiting belief section?
You know what's funny? I've never really had like an outside mentor that's like, helped me through this journey. It's pretty much been like, I mean, sure, I've been influenced by people, whether they're like public figures or, my own reading that I do from authors and so on. But I haven't really had a mentor, which I have FOMO about because a lot of people I know have always had a coach or a mentor when growing up who've given them some direction, which for whatever reason I just never have. And yeah, so I don't think I had a friend or a person per se who actually helped me snap out of this reality of mine. But yeah, I think I just became aware from exposing myself to different experiences, and I went for some really inspiring retreats and like immersions and read a bunch of books, and I don't know, just like a basic thing of everything that basically helped me be where I am today, yeah, in whatever way that I am, yeah.
That's cool. For me, I had an individual that we get along great and to this day, and we were able to mesh ourselves.
That's amazing. That's lucky. I love that.
You only
Yeah.
need one.
Like I said, most people do.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have that, then, okay, wait a minute. It's not just my thoughts, but if it's just your thoughts and then very many outside, now it's one is the world of difference in that case, which is a nice feature. How do you get your mental state into a good space? What are some things you might do so that you have well-being, you like your day?
So today has been one of those days, in fact. So the timing of this question is pretty apt because I've been feeling really out of it today, just like really low energy levels. So I think
Handing energy over. Handing energy to Sukun.
Yeah, thank you. Need it. Big heart right there. So I think, what happens is we often get in this trap of judging and bashing ourselves that why am I feeling this way? Like, what's going on? Like, everyone else is acting normal. Like, what's wrong with me? So, in times like those, I know this sounds really cliche, but self-compassion is going to be your best friend, and I come to your rescue. Like accepting how you're feeling in that moment without any judgment, because people go further down the spiral when they keep on questioning why it's happening than just accepting that it's happening right now. And I'm not saying that what happened today is just like a mental health thing, because it's just feeling low energy, which is fine. I have those days. Everyone does every now and then, but yeah, so I actually, plugged out for a bit. I think I realized that too much of screen time can be draining. Sitting on your butt all day is, painful as well, because you do get weak glutes and there's full science behind that. But yeah, going for a walk, plugging out, listening to music and whatever works for you. And I think sometimes we are in our head so much that we just like forget to actually do the fundamentals, which is move to your body, like resort to your body. We keep thinking like, what do I do now? Like, I should think better, I should do better. But like, if you just trust your body, and movement is key. I wrote about this on my Twitter yesterday. Like, you can't think your way out of stress, but you can breathe and move your way out of it. So going for walks, get out there. I love dancing. So the one thing I do actually, literally, is every morning I get out of my bed and I just put music on my AirPods and I just start dancing. And I love that. So it just wakes me up. So you basically have to just use a combination of your body and your mind to help you navigate through difficult states when you're feeling a difficult emotion. But acceptance is the first part. After awareness, obviously. Actually, awareness is the first part, and then acceptance probably the second.
As far as related to dancing and activity, how much of it is about being proactive and taking action to cause your mind to go into a good place versus trying to just figure it out in your own head and solve any issues without actually going into the world?
That's a great question. And a lot of it is proactive. In fact, this reminds me to share with you that a couple of months ago, I had a guest on my show called Jess Mel, who gained popularity after her story went viral, which is basically she underwent depression during COVID. And this girl took active measures to snap herself out of depression by doing one like unconventional activity for 100 days straight, every single day, something new. So you have to, I know it's really hard because you convince yourself that like this is, my doomsday. I'm never going to come out of this, but like you have to make the effort. I mean, and therapy, of course, is one of those efforts as well. It definitely counts, but you have to do something. Otherwise, it gets more difficult for you to deal with that, whatever's happening internally.
I like the unconventional idea, one every 100 days. That was popular back in 2009 and 10, where it'd be 100 ways to do this or 100 something. Those
Really,
articles.
yeah.
And so like
Yeah, so she did it. I mean, I was so impressed. I was like, I have to hear more about her story. So I called her on and like had a really nice chat with her. Yeah.
She did 100 unconventional things in 100 days.
Yeah, every single day. And she was fine. I mean, I'm sure and she did say she still has medication, which is also a part of people who, a part of the ritual for people who are depressed. But yeah, she is in a much better space from where she was that time.
It makes a difference when you alter things from your
Yeah.
end first, and then you can figure it out. This actually relates with, do we need to be social creatures to process things? Oh, also processing. I want to add this in. Rumination. I saw this graph that showed that positive rumination and thoughts can be a little bit positive for your day, but negative daydreaming is way down there. It's one of the most negative parts of a person's day. And then neutral was close to the middle. Do you think about the effects of just sitting there with your thoughts and how it tends to lean in the messing up the day direction?
You're asking me personally what works for me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, I'll have a bit of both every now and then, where I'm ruminating about like, where am I right now? Like, what's to come next? Like, why am I not moving fast enough? And then the positive rumination would include things like, being psyched about my future, like what's to come, the journey I'm on, and like, creative visualization. So those things come under the latter, positive rumination. And when you're just stuck in a negative thought pattern, then that's draining, because you think that there is no way out of it, but like you obviously can reframe your mind, which of course psychologists call cognitive reframing. Yeah.
We can do that. We have that ability to do cognitive.
Yeah, we
reframing.
do. We do. We have agencies in most things that we that we think we don't, but we do have agency, including in how we react with other people, which is another big part of my core work, which is conflict resolution and authentic connections. So yeah.
What is a one or two strong barriers to authentic connection? Maybe someone out there feels like most of their scenarios, they live like a false existence. How can they get more towards them showcasing themselves and the other person they're connecting with showcasing themselves?
Okay, that's a great question. I think we have developed too many barriers in this world that we live in today, where we are more focused on accumulating followers and getting reactions and being transactional than actually creating deep, meaningful connections. And the first part of changing that is to become really intentional. Like what does a person mean to me right now, and how can I deepen this into something that's meaningful, right? Otherwise, you're stuck with a number on your profile, or even like in your life, because we just do not go deep enough in our questions. And I think questions actually form the basis of a great conversation. Like, we get so stuck with like, what do you do, where do you live, and that's it, right? Like, period. But like, there's so much more you can ask a person. And it starts with intentionality and taking a genuine interest in the other person. Like, that's so, so huge. And just listening, because we're so rushed with our time that we forget the fundamentals. Like, why are you even talking to the person right now? Like, what's in it for you? What's in it for them? Right? Has to lead somewhere meaningful for both of you. So, and not being conscious of how you're being perceived, because again, like, this stands true for like since the beginning of time, I guess. But great connection is built through sharing parts of yourself and being vulnerable if you have to, which we are so afraid of. Like, we avoid vulnerability like the plague, right? Like, I don't want to go there right now. It's like dangerous territory. But when you start sharing parts of your story, the other person will open up towards that as well. And it becomes like this two-way connection where it becomes better than where you started. And it just goes deeper from there.
That's true.
But I will say that like a caveat to that is like, you have to only with those you trust, not like random people. You can't just, vomit your life story like people who you have hardly met, because that doesn't work sometimes either. You'll get judged. You might get like, there might be some backlash. I mean, it might backfire, but you have to just understand like what this person means to you, and like how deep you want to go with them. And if you do want to go deep with them, then you do these things. Yeah. And ask right questions. Yeah.
That's the only way.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out something. I should throw in some vulnerabilities here. I was not fond of one of the higher level institutions that I went to for a year. Not a good part of my existence. Let's throw in a couple more.
You know what I mean? Stop.
Yeah. No, I just want
like open up your life story.
I know, but
right
I can't. It's good to do. Who's gonna do that out of nowhere? Let's see. I'll throw in a second one here. Not fond of a lot of. I don't mesh with the majority of individuals, which is all right, and that's okay. And then let's throw in one.
Can I ask? You got me curious now when you said that. So you actually invited trouble by saying that. Why is that?
I invited trouble.
Why do you not get along with the majority of people?
I have an idea. This would be the idea. I'm showcasing my actual self. I get along really good with, let's say, a 4-year-old, because there's no blockages there. So me and 4-year-olds
judgment there, is there?
are like this, which I don't know if most can get along well with a 4-year-old, and 4-year-olds think it's odd too.
I can.
So there you go. Okay, this is saying something. I think
love kids. Yeah.
Okay, we see, and that's why all things link, and with the, let's say, more common public, I believe they got to a point where I had to encapsulate into this little area to be okay day to day. And so if I show up and I'm this ball of existence, wait a minute, too much risk factor. So then I'll be impinged upon, even just for being. Same with the 4-year-old. They'll be like, oh, okay, he's doing too much. But actually, you were that before something caused you to.
Right.
That was you before the things that you are now regretful that occurred. Shouldn't we support that? Like the thing I gave with you earlier. Wouldn't they be like, Sukun, you're the goal. We're trying to get to more of you. We are not fully joyful. So how can we be more like you? Would be a great question. But that never comes up. It comes up like, Sukun, see this exact salary specifications for this thing that we do when you do this and you do this and you do this. If you just do this for 3 years, you'll be good. But then after that, if you do this thing for 3 years, you'll be good. By the time you're done with these 10 3 years things, everybody's 74 and they're like, oh, I missed out on the things that, wait a minute, like you just said it was 3 years. But then at the end of the 3 years, yeah, you should just, it's like become
So it's
linear
basically
forever.
fear of judgment, right? Like just being judged, and that's what really isolates people. If you can't be
Yeah.
yourself as you are, through your quirks, through your flaws, and you have this judgment holding you back, then it does. I guess I get where you're coming from. Yeah.
And if you bring out, showcase things that the person one day decided, I can't, I limited myself from that, the most default way of the individual responding to that is to, okay, that's no good, versus actually I could have done more. Because one takes responsibility, the other one's easy to just, that thing over there, make it external, and your world remains the
Yeah.
same. It's like a safety mechanism there.
Yeah, I see that.
I think that was 3 vulnerabilities, which is good. Yeah, vulnerabilities are great. I like them. The more you can showcase, then you get into that category. Because once, let's say you do that regularly, now that people know that as your world, now you're not the individual that like one vulnerability would just completely shake up your day. You'd throw out like 50, and you do it on a regular basis, and people know you for that. I like that space.
Yeah, the biggest antidote to judgment is what?
The biggest antidote to judgment is
Curiosity.
oh.
The moment, I think we really undermine the power of curiosity. The moment you, like, rather than judge and label someone, just understand and seek to understand why, what could be the reason behind this, and use empathy, everything changes. But we don't do enough of that. We rather disassociate and judge and label than just be curious about, like, hey, why would this person act like this? Like, what's their story? What's their mental model of life? What's their upbringing, right? And it's so powerful. Like, I think a lot of this is really handy in even like navigating through difficult situations and conflict, but we just back off and give up too soon. And that obviously deprives us of connection that we actually can really form in those moments.
I've got one related here. That's a great point. Curiosity, because then if they checked, if some individuals, somehow we just go back in time, hand it back to time, they show up and they run into you 10 years ago or when it was limiting belief time, and they are asking questions, where is your mind at, and what would you like to see more of? What kinds of things might you have told them if they're actually curious? Unbelievable that they weren't, but what would you tell them?
About what? What are they asking me?
The individuals that might have descriptions of what you should do, or the way you're not meshing with the certain criteria, if they were instead of that curious of what you envisioned or what inspired you, what would you showcase at that time?
That's such a great question. Wow, this really has to be like one of those ones that you got to go back and think about, like what you would rather say. Because I got to admit right now, I would not have half the awareness I do right now about this stuff. Like, I would not know about curiosity, judgment, empathy, and all this stuff, all these things. What I would say about myself at that time is, I know there's more to the story. Like, how can I get there? Like, how can I snap out of this right now? And why am I feeling stuck right now? Like, what's going on here? So I would ask them, like, how have they done it if they have in their lives, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Not sure if that's what you're looking for, but it just came to mind randomly. It's a pretty thought-provoking question for sure.
Right. It's like a sense that something's not there that suits you, maybe not what they're describing, but something's not fully formed.
Yeah, it's not making sense at the time. Yeah.
How can I get towards that?
Yeah.
I probably have elements like that too. There are times when I was thinking things, I'm like, this is not exactly it, but I didn't know. I just didn't know until I met people and like, oh, words. Okay, that's a concept. I want to feel like this. This is what I want to make.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Figures. Tell me about, in the current time, are there any figures that you look to and model after, or what they say really speaks to you? Is there any qualities of individuals right now that you resonate with?
Oh, yeah. Oh, heaps.
Heaps.
Simon Sinek is one of them. I love how he puts ideas out there as raw as he gets. Like, I love how... So basically, I'm very drawn to unconventional thinkers because I'm one of them as well. like challenging mainstream narratives, challenging mainstream beliefs, and making people actually see another way of thinking and being. And that's what he does for me all the time. So very inspired by his work. Another one would be Brené Brown, like, of course, The Art of Connection, Vulnerability, very inspired by her as well. And, being daring and bold enough to show up as your raw self in your purity that you are without the fears of judgment, which are inevitable, but like you got to just move past that and show up anyway in the arena. Peter Diamandis, who is like doing so much work in technology, health, changing the world in his own way. Yeah, and I love Jason Silva's storytelling skills. He's a great storyteller, if you know who he is. Yeah.
I don't know him specifically, but I know storytelling and its hefty importance
Yeah.
represented by many of people. How key is it as a person that you make a story that you then showcase to individuals repeatedly? What does that have to entail? Because I know it's a huge deal. If you can showcase a solid story of your existence, then bam, people can like, oh, okay, that, I get that. And then they associate it with you.
So this is interesting territory for me because, my story, how I grew up and my challenges and my wins or whatever you want to call it, like involves other people, right? In my own dynamic, in my own ecosystem, my family, my social support system or whatever. And I don't have their permission to share that story yet. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
I know it's a very powerful part of who you are, and I haven't reached that stage yet because I haven't had their permission. Not that I've asked them. I haven't asked them either. But I want to honor them. But, A, they're still alive. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm very much part of the whole dynamic, so to say, and I want to be respectful. So like, I admittedly haven't really owned all of my story yet, just because I don't have their permission. And they're part of my story. It's very instrumental in who I am today. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. But people who've done it, like obviously it's inspired people and millions all over the world, whoever has done it, because it's the greatest way we connect through our stories.
Right. I like that you mentioned that. I was thinking about that a few days ago, that, yeah, the full story can't be showcased similarly
Yet.
on my end.
I say yet
Right.
in capital.
Right.
Yeah.
Without some of the... It's funny. I'm pretty sure I said that last week to somebody. So it's funny when these little things you come up and you think it's just on your own end, but actually there's others that are also...
That's what stories do. You share one and then you realize other people have the same thing. And that's how you're like, whoa, I'm not alone in this. The other people are actually feeling the same thing as well. So that's the magic of just sharing. Forget stories, just sharing anything. That's what it does. Yeah.
Makes you feel more full. It's a nice feature. It does, right? You're like, wait a minute. Okay, cool. This is fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other people, you want to give them a semblance of what they were too. So to do it so early might almost seem like you're grabbing everything of your own, versus if it's the right timing or you have included them in some way that is suitable. Now it's not like you were just grabbing it all for your own
True.
showcasing. Yeah.
True.
Has to be taken into account. The thing you're mentioning of with people, I just talked with Brian. Brian wrote Selfless. It's about how we
Oh, wow. I'm going to check that book out.
just came out. I think it just came out yesterday, but it relates to what we're saying about how his idea is that so much of what we do is socially, like we can't really grow ourselves like an island. All our growth comes
Conditioned,
through
you
with
mean?
people.
Socially conditioned?
Yeah, our conditioning, our growth, all our experiences and our abilities, they really blossom with people, versus the idea that, if I just go and think things through for 5 hours on my own, I can do some things, maybe reorganizing, but I can only branch further with other individuals because we as humans link. Thoughts on that?
So linking, just to be the last line again?
Yes, like thoughts on the idea that most of our growth can only come through our collaborations and what we see from others, what we read from them, human plus human.
I mean, yeah, the biggest example in this context is imagine someone living in a cave for like 20 years of their lives. What are they going to learn? They're in a cave. You have to have social contact. Even if they learn about themselves and their thoughts, if they don't kill themselves by going crazy with their own internal thoughts, like if they come out alive out there, they only have so much perspective. Like we all learn from social contact and our relationships, through experiences, through our learnings, and through knowledge, I guess, which is always like, circulated in economies all the time. So I think that's very, very key for our own growth to have social contact in some way or the other, in
Uh,
whatever way it may be.
I like this example very much because it's very easy to visualize. And if I was in a cave for 20 years, I'm not going that far. That's a great point. I like that you made it very substantial because
Yeah.
at some point I'll just recluse. And does that relate with?
Do you remember Castaway, Tom Hanks?
I barely watch movies, but I know the concept. I know the concept. Tell
So
us
this
about
guy,
Castaway.
just for context sake, I can't believe that I watched the movie, like the greatest movie of all time. I love Castaway. I watched like 10 times when I was like growing up, if not more. But like he was so craving, like he was so alone and just craving connection that he actually made his football or basketball, whatever, a ball. He made his this ball an object, his friend, and called him Wilson. And when Wilson was lost in the waves of the sea, a very choppy sea one day, he was distraught. He was destroyed internally. So that's how he actually formed a connection with some object. He needed that. So watch the movie, but like, yeah, it's very, very, that was because we melted. I was like, man, it's such an emotional scene. It's so emotional. It's just a ball, but like you felt the connection with the ball, yeah.
That's a great extension of that. Like we value that so much that if it's not the case, we will do it with an inanimate object because we're so reaching for that. Like there's a but, there's a thus.
Yeah, that
We're both
connection that
growing.
we all crave. Yeah.
That's a nice way to look at it.
I mean, as kids, we have toys, right? We make our Barbies our best friends, and boys make GI Joes or whatever it may be right
Race
now in
car.
the world, whatever the new equivalent of that is. Yeah, they become our friends. They're
There's a
imaginary, but
story.
they're friends to us. So
Give
yeah,
it a name. It's going here. I go there. What are you doing? Okay, it goes there. Right. Now it's like that's a preface to the later context of connecting with social individuals.
yeah.
I want to turn to this one because I didn't include it. Conflict resolution. How is that linked in here? That's not one of my categories that I examine. What about that speaks to you? What would you profess to others or want to build in others in relation to conflict resolution?
So a lot of this begins with self-awareness, which is the beginning of everything in terms of how we show up for other people. And why conflict even starts in the first place is basically a denial of personal feelings and responsibility and projecting blame onto the other person. Like you did this and you did that, and like, where is my needs? Like, so there's a combination of factors here. We are terrified of expressing ourselves for what we need and what we feel, because we don't know half the time of how we feel ourselves. And so we find these very mysterious ways of blaming the other person for something they may not be responsible for at all in the first place. So it's easy to say something like, you ignored me the other day.
You ignored me
saying,
the other day.
okay, so that's what I'm saying to you, right? But then I felt hurt. Now that's very hard to say because that's where you're getting in vulnerability, which isn't easy to come. So I felt hurt because I felt left out. So you see how it shifts from you to I in the same instance, right? And also like owning your opinions. I've talked about this in one of my articles as well recently, that we make such a silly mistake of actually communicating our opinions as facts. All men are jerks. All people are so and so. It happens all the time, and we think that's reality. Something we have a personal experience of becomes the ultimate truth, which is never the case. You can't do it like that. It doesn't work, and people will get triggered by that. Because the narrower your beliefs and the closer your mind, the more conflict you will invite in your life. It's just as simple as that.
Is that because you are distancing yourself from reality, which is more nuanced than some sort of
Exactly.
binary element? Yeah.
Or you're convincing yourself otherwise. And there's so much to reality because, like I said, every one of us has our own mental models that we operate with. And we got to dive deeper to understand not just ours, but the other person's mental models of life as well. What's their baggage? What's their backpack like? What have they got in their experiences, their belief systems, their thoughts, their feelings, their conditionings? There's so much in there. We got to unpack, and that's where you have empathy, curiosity, instead of anger and resentment and judgment, because they're all just very sad expressions of our own unmet needs, because we're so used to projecting our stuff onto others. It just happens so unconsciously as a defense mechanism.
Is that element or that category tiring to maintain this limited form daily in a world that's not as limited? Would you say it's more tiring on that side than for the individual that's more free-flowing and
When you say
open?
free-flowing, what do you mean by that?
Like the person that's more okay with showcasing their internal self, the issues they've had, looking to
Yeah.
build from the day.
So people who have trouble expressing themselves obviously struggle more with conflict, if that's what you're getting at. People who are able to express themselves freely without the fears of judgment and be vulnerable, if that's what the situation calls for, will navigate through those conversations through, I think, relatively easier than most other people will. But it takes a huge amount of awareness on both sides. There's just no way around it. Awareness of your own self and of the other person, and willing to see, like, find some common middle ground. If you're going to be like, I'm over here, you budge. So basically, it's like saying you have to take 100% responsibility for your 50% of the equation. It's just that. Yeah.
Sometimes if you really want it to work, you have to almost overreach into the other side to make up for a deficit there. But they have to want to as well in some form, or else you're
Yeah.
really...
Yeah, you can only do so much. You have to have a willingness, but like you got to at least do your bit in whatever capacity that you can by, you know, using, like I said, awareness, empathy, curiosity, and expressing yourself constructively, not like in a way that's damaging or disrespectful. Because one thing we really have a misunderstanding about is that authentically communicating is the same as just spitting out the truth. Like, I feel this, that's it. That's not authentic at all. That's just like a very disrespectful way that's only going to perpetuate more damage in your relationship. Being authentic in this context would mean being aware of your thoughts and channeling them with constructive or productive expression, which I just talked about like a few minutes ago. Like, I feel so and so because of what happened. What can we do about this? Rather than blurting your truth out, blurting your feelings out the most unhealthy manner. That won't serve anyone, and not you, because there will be some regret that will inevitably follow.
Is it fair to say that those types of showcasings that are very blunt, very rapid, almost never do well because it's like grabbing for the moment? It's almost self-oriented, and the concept is not only 10 milliseconds. The concept is days, minutes, weeks, and such. But you're trying to just, well, this is the does that work well?
It doesn't. I mean, if people have a short-term memory, it works because people forget, but most often they don't. I mean, in most cases, human memory is very short-lived. I mean, we've seen that even with COVID. And I lost you again. I lost you, yeah. Hello?
Hello. Okay. Go ahead. Short-term memory.
I was saying in most cases, human memory is short-lived because we've seen that with COVID as well. We forgot about the whole thing. We moved on with our lives like nothing ever happened. But most people will hold on to resentments because the mind will remember, fear and fear and dangerous things and things that threaten our identity will remember far longer. And that's why it is so hard for even grown-ass adults to get over get past resentments. It's very hard for them because they remember it so clearly, So one part of yourself is like, I should get over this, but like your ego or your sense of self that's being rejected or threatened doesn't allow you to. It holds on to the pain like, it's been there forever and there's no tomorrow.
The individuals that have such a strong ego, do you try to work with it, or do you speak in a way such that, okay, whenever this is diminished, we can talk, but for now, this is a space that cannot be worked with? Is it worth trying when someone's in a pompous state or they're
No,
making somebody
not
else
at that
famous?
time. It's not going to work. It's just backfire. I mean, you have to. So everyone needs something called a timeout, whether it's yourself or the other person, and you can get out of the space, go for a walk, whatever, if that's what you're talking about, and the other person as well. So environment is very, very important because that's going to be very conducive to how the chat carries on. If you're going to be, what's the word called, like calming someone down when they're highly temperamental, then it's not going to work. You're going to trigger them even more. And this is where self-regulation is so key about how we regulate ourselves, which we have never been taught to do, in any sense.
Are we missing some components of what's informed to younger individuals. There are certain things that are described, standard operating procedures, do this, linear description. But for that child or even adult to have a good day, I think those things are those left out, missing?
To a large extent, yes, because we never taught the component of emotional intelligence, what it means to actually get a grip over your emotions and have the awareness to accept, express, and communicate them effectively. I mean, I'm sure, there's a lot of progress now with schools being more conscious and cognizant of EQ and mindfulness. So it's definitely better, but there still is a large population of the world that still prioritizes IQ over EQ, which kind of like doesn't work, because no wonder you've seen grown-ups like leaders in corporate suits like acting like kids because they haven't done the inner work. And that's when you say that most adults, unfortunately, are, children stuck in adult bodies. And that's just how it is, because when you don't do your own work, then you will be a mess and it'll show to the world.
It'll just be a mess ongoing for decades. It doesn't just things don't just get done on their own.
Yeah, that's why I'm just a huge advocate of EQ, like just being emotionally smart, because that will direct so much of how your life will turn out. Minus all the degrees and the certificates and on the trainings, like train yourself first, man, how you show up in life.
So you're saying these degrees and certificates are not the be-all, end-all that say a person is complete?
I'm going to piss off a lot of like doctors. I'm joking.
Unbelievable.
But, no, of course they have their own place, but like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like not discounting the value and importance of EQ in our lives as well, which sadly has been neglected for a long, long time. When I was growing up, there was no talk about like, having tough conversations or managing your emotions and knowing what the emotions even are, why they're showing up at this time. Now, of course, there's a huge dialogue around this. But when I was young, no way. Younger, I'm still young. Younger, no way. Yeah.
You think about that concept that the generational differences caused a certain group that had a more rough upbringing. So it was rough, so they became rough. So they passed on rough. And then for the younger, it's not as rough, but still the rough is being passed on like it's still today the same way. It's almost the remnant, kind of like the
100%.
Appendix.
This is where parenting comes in, right? Like if parents don't do their own work, then like they will intentionally or unintentionally carry on the same patterns from one gen to the next generation, and it carries on like a circle, like a cycle. And a lot of these patterns are destructive, so people have to be aware of how they are today and what they want to, have the future gen show up as. And like you said, like it's very normal for this stuff to carry on if you don't become aware and put a stop to it at the time it's supposed to have a stop to.
Now, similar to this program, you have your podcast. One thing I like to check, because I know from when you create material, it really impacts you, or can. What are some elements of yourself that have grown or that you have figured out in the process of speaking to others on your program? Does anything come to mind that is different now versus when you started doing that?
I started the podcast out of just instinct. It just happened like randomly. I was sitting one day, I was like, why don't I just start this thing? Because I love conversations, I love meeting people. I'm still stuck at home. I'll just do that. But what I have learned through this process is the power of conversations and just getting new perspectives is so cool. Sitting on your laptop and just getting all these new perspectives from everyone, because I love learning as a person. And my interest and my curiosity has only amplified to a whole other level from the journey of podcasting. And I could never have imagined myself doing this like 5 years ago, because I was terrified of speaking, by the way. Yeah, like terrified.
What causes that? It's funny to hear, right? Because right now it's speaking smoothly and such. So
I'm still not popular speaker, but like, yeah, I've come a long way. But anyway, you were saying, yeah.
What would if you talked to you 5 years ago, could you figure out why the you 5 years ago was not wanting to do it, even though obviously the ability was right on the way?
I don't believe I had the ability, right? I was like, I can't speak means I can't speak. Growing up, I can't was my favorite freaking word. That was it. My favorite phrase. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I never was that typical confident child in school into sports or speaking or debates. I never did any of that. I just shied away from that. I was like, maybe I have nothing in me in terms of my, like, what's the word? Potential to speak. So I never tried. And I was always scared of being judged for even trying. So yeah.
That's just a very key point you just brought up, which I have thought about. I know a extended family member that a lot of times, I don't know, half their language might be in their language, using the word is no, but in their language. And they use it in every sentence. Oh, that didn't work. No, that's not happening. It's like it's built in. Same way you were saying, I can't. Was that handed to you?
No. Thankfully, my parents have been very, very supportive and very encouraging in every way. Both my mom and dad have been amazing, but I don't know. It's just funny how if I go back and deconstruct where this silly narrative even came from. Like, yeah, I just think it's a lot of it was to do with like, the evidence you get from school, whether it's your exams, your academics, your teachers, it all just combined and amplified to a whole other damaging level. So that was my story in a nutshell, but yeah.
Fair. I think about these. I think about it in so many details of the yes and the no, and even like for scrolling on an item, the way they programmed it so that because nodding up and down is like agreement, so I feel like that's why they made scrolling up and down. If you scroll sideways, it's more on the no side and thought side. Same thing with Andrew Huberman was talking about looking side to side takes more mental processing. These things behind the scenes can have a substantial impact.
True.
Two last ones here. One, what is a message you would want people to take away from your program or from having interacted with you if there's a broad message you're trying to showcase to all people?
Okay, wow. I think the first big one would be it is never too late to change. And you have the absolute potential to make anything that you want happen and keep believing in yourself. And the other one would be like, if you want to have strong connections, then dive deeper with people. Yeah. And use empathy to channel your judgments and anger towards people, because I'm a huge believer in authentic connection, like I said. And yeah, I think it's one of the biggest values of mine. Because from that comes conflict resolution as well, trying to create more peace in the world than more chaos that there is.
And the last one here, if you were writing a book of your existence, what might you title a current chapter or a recent happening chapter? Does anything come to mind?
That's easy. I think I will just call it work in progress because I'm just that. I don't know. But right now my chapter is interesting. You asked me. Let me think about that. What's my current chapter of my life?
We can't help but be interesting on this program. It's impossible.
Yeah, of course. I love the question though. Leading with curiosity. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Because I think that's also, if I can explain that a bit, if you want some justification of what I just...
We want justification out here.
Why I said that. It's coming from my keenness to learn more, and that's coming evident through my podcast conversations, the work I'm diving deeper into EQ. Right now, I'm currently working on a mini course on emotional mastery. And yeah, so these things have just, led from one thing to the other. And I promise you, like, I didn't have a plan to do a podcast. Like, it just happened. Pure curiosity. I was like, let's go for this and let's see where this goes. It was just very random. But yeah.
Just to add that little tidbit, emotional mastery, what prompted that, and what can people potentially look to in that element?
Oh, just becoming the power of self-awareness. First of all, why we have all the issues we have in our lives because of lack of self-awareness, and how it's important to actually, solve some of the issues in your life involving people at least, and then the elements of what it takes to like become aware of your emotions and how you're feeling, and acceptance and regulations, self-regulation, self-acceptance, self-inquiry, self-expression, and things like that. And yeah, what to do when you are dealing with difficult people in difficult situations. So it's just going to be a bit of a combination of those factors.
Sounds wonderful on that one. Sukun, I would like to thank you for having joined on this episode of the show, showcasing a bit about your material, joining in on emotions, connection, showcasing a bit about what you have posted about, which, by the way, wonderful postings across various locations. That's a great effort, and we applaud these. Actually, we
Thank
should
you.
throw out some applause out here because when you showcase, you're making a statement, you're showing boldness, you're influencing layers of individuals across the way. So it's very valuable, and some recognize it. Glad to have had you on.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much for having me, Armen. This was great. Thank you.
You know it. And we are out.